She stepped through the heavy iron gates of Blackstone Correctional Facility just after dawn, the cold air biting at her cheeks. Her name was Marina Clark, newly appointed nurse for the prison infirmary. Everything about the place was stark. The barbed wire coils, the concrete walls, the distant clank of metal doors, the smell of disinfectant mingled with despair. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Marina had worked in hospitals all her life. Her hands were steady, her heart tender. She believed in healing. When the job offer had come, she had hesitated, afraid that this prison world would harden her. But she thought, people who are suffering deserve care, no matter where they are. And so she accepted, vowing to treat every patient with dignity. Her supervisor introduced her to the infirmary, a narrow ward with rows of cots, thin mattresses, peeling paint, a shuttered window that seldom opened. There were patients with chronic illnesses, those recovering from injuries, prisoners coming after the night shift, bandaged, bruised, or simply sick. The medical supplies were thin, the staff even thinner. The existing nurse, a blunt woman named Felicia, told Marina curtly, "Don't expect miracles. You'll do what you can, but don't get attached." Marina nodded. She would try regardless. At first, her days were consumed with minor wounds, bandaging cuts from fights, treating infections, handling colds and flu. Some of the inmates were wary, their voices low. Others were angry, resentful. Trust had to be earned through small kindnesses. Marina listened. She cleaned wounds thoroughly. She made sure pain medicine reached those who needed it. She asked questions, allergies, dietary restrictions, and she cared enough to hear grinches about their days beyond the infirmary doors. On her second week, a man was brought in fractured wrist, possibly broken from a guard's rough handling. His name was Darren. His eyes flashed suspicion. He accused Marina of being part of the machine. She knelt beside him, murmured that she would do her best for his pain, no more, no less. She X-rayed the wrist, wrapped it, arranged follow-up. When he winced in discomfort, she checked in at night, brought ice packs, gentle reassurances. Over days, he relaxed, stopped suspicions when she knelt and asked about his home, his mother, the poem he recited in second grade. She praised it softly. It was, she said, brave to share memories when one is in chains. Darren surprised himself by speaking of them. It was in the third week that she discovered something worse than wounds and coughs, neglect buried in forms and oversight. One midday, she reviewed medication logs for diabetic inmates. Something was off. One patient, MS Benton, had been missing insulin doses. She should have had injections every morning. The log claimed she had, but when Marina assessed her, the patient's sugars were dangerously high. Her hands shook. She confessed no insulin had been administered for 2 mornings. It was past noon, and she was dehydrated, confused. Marina's heart clenched. She confronted Felicia. "Why is the log falsified?" The nurse who did morning rounds skipped meds. Felicia shifted, eyes hard. "We're short, staffed. Sometimes you have to pick your battles." Marina replied, "Lives are your battle." But Felicia dismissed her. "Don't make enemies." Marina didn't back down. She reported the discrepancy to Dr. Simmons, the prison doctor, who looked grave. He thanked Marina for her honesty, then warned her quietly, "If you make noise, there'll be pushback. The system will circle the wagons." But even so, he ordered that MS Benton receive her insulin and be monitored. Over the next days, the logs were corrected, the shift assignments rechecked. Some guards were angry. One, in particular, named Grayson, glared at Marina when he overheard complaints. "You don't know how things work here, nurse," she replied simply. "I know people suffer when care is delayed." He sneered. "Don't try to become hero." Marina learned that some of the breakdowns came from the warden's policies. Warden Hawthorne had insisted on staffing cuts, minimizing overtime, pushing guard responsibilities, trimming budgets. He saw the prison as ledger, numbers, cost, maintain order and cut cost. That was his creed. Many in authority believed that compassion was a luxury. Marina believed it was a necessity. Midway through her 3rd month, a riot broke out in the cell block for those on solitary confinement. A fire had started, arson, some said. Smoke filled the corridor, panic ensued, guards scrambled. Some inmates banged on doors, trying to escape the smoke. Some cried for help. The infirmary got the alarm. There were injured, splinters of glass, burns, smoke inhalation. Marina, gloves on, mask strapped, rushed over. Her skin stung from the heat, the choking smoke. She helped coordinate removal of the injured to the infirmary, her hands guiding stretcher after stretcher. There was Jacob, a quiet man with asthma. The smoke had overwhelmed him, and Rosa, whose arm was badly burned, a young man whose nose was broken. They moaned. Guards shouted for order. Marina knelt, treated burns, administered oxygen. Some guards stood in her way, wanting order first. Marina insisted. "Let them breathe," she said, raising her voice. A guard shoved her back. She steadied herself and kept going. The wounded were more important than protocol in that moment. After the chaos, she regionally worked with Dr. Simmons to triage patients, patch up wounds, counsel the survivors who sobbed. Some inmates looked at her with tears, some with gratitude. Marina stayed through the night, refusing to go home until the worst were stabilized. She left in the morning, exhausted, smelling of smoke and disinfectant. In the aftermath, blame was being allocated. Hawthorne held a staff meeting. He demanded reports, answers. How did the fire start? Who bore responsibility? The guards said inmates started it. Some said guards failed. Some said safety inspections were neglected. Warden Hawthorne looked around, face stern. He glared at Felicia, the nurse manager. Why were there no water hoses in the corridor? Why did guards arrive late? He asked. Felicia offered excuses about unions, budget. Marina listened, sick with anger at how victims were being sidelined. Meanwhile, inmates demanded via informal networks that their medical needs be met. They asked for better care for burns, smoke inhalation, supported Marina's insistence that MS, Benton, for example, had been neglected earlier. A petition circulated among them to treat us as human. One morning, Marina found MS, Benton sitting up. She had improved, her eyes clear, gratitude in her voice. "Thank you for not giving up," she said. It was one of the few tender moments in the place. But throughout the facility, rumors began that someone had reported to some external oversight agency, an ombudsman or a correctional health board, about the negligence. Some staff feared retaliation. Marina's apartment number had leaked. People whispered she could be fired, demoted, isolated. Marina prepared her documentation, medical logs, patient reports, and sent them as required, but also made copies. She planned to submit a full report when time was right. But then, one afternoon, Warden Hawthorne called her office. She walked in, her hands still slightly shaking from a long shift, and saw Hawthorne seated behind his desk. His face bore a scowl, but his eyes were curious. "Nurse Clark," he began, voice dry, "I've heard some concerns about missed medications, about your behavior during the fire, about care." Marina clasped her hands on her lap. Her heart thundered. "Some say you overstep," he said. "You know I believe in hierarchy. I don't like people undermining chain of command." Marina nodded. She replied, "I believe in caring. When someone is suffering, I believe the higher duty is to heal. Policies exist, but policies do not absolve moral responsibility." Hawthorne's face hardened. He left. Then later that day, an inspector from the Correctional Health Board arrived. She came through Marina's reports, her logs, examined a mess, Benton, Jacob, Rosa. She talked with inmates. She talked with Marina. She talked with guards. She talked with supervisory staff. The inspector called a meeting of senior staffing, including Hawthorne. Marina sat quietly. The inspector laid out violations: failure to administer insulin, inadequate medical care post-riot, unsafe corridors that contributed to injury, understaffing leading to delays in treatment. She warned that the facility could be penalized, staff held accountable. Hawthorne listened, face tight. He turned to the nurse manager, Felicia, who tried to deflect, to place blame elsewhere, to accuse inmates of exaggerating. The inspector rebuffed. "Nurses' logs, patient conditions. These don't lie." Marina stood when Hawthorne looked her way. She said, "If I may." Silence. "My interest has never been to embarrass this institution. My intention is to make it safer, more humane, so fewer suffer, so that what we do here is not cruelty." Hawthorne's eyes flickered. Staff murmured. The guard Grayson looked away. The inspector nodded. In the next few days, Hawthorne called Marina in again. This time, his posture was different, less rigid, more measured. He showed her a memo. The board had ordered staffing increase. He showed her a damaged corridor floor was to be replaced. Better medical supplies would be provided. The leadership needed her recommendations. "You will help us plan the new infirmary layout, the staffing schedule. I want your input." Marina felt cautious but hopeful. There was resistance. Some guards grumbled. "This is nurses meddling," they said. Some staff resented Marina's insistence, but Marina persisted with kindness and firmness, always proud to be compassionate, always open to feedback, always focused on patients. Months passed. The infirmary was reorganized, the nurse team expanded, shifts restructured, medication rounds were verified by 2 people, inspections frequent, cleaning and ventilation improved, mortality from neglect dropped. Inmates reported they felt safer going for help rather than hiding illness. The wounded were now treated swiftly. People who'd been afraid to speak of pain now asked for treatment, and Marina saw, slowly, that the culture in the facility was changing in small but real ways. One evening, toward the end of her first year, there came another emergency. A guard had injured his hand badly, crushed in a cell door. He needed immediate surgery. The shift was chaotic. Marina rushed, cleaned the wound under bright lights, stabilized him, prepared him for transport to a hospital. She stayed until the medical team arrived. The guard, pale and in obvious pain, looked at her. His eyes moistened, perhaps from relief. "Thank you, nurse," he managed. She touched his shoulder, said, "Get well." Word of that kindness traveled. The guards, colleagues, inmates, staff, all noticed that Marina treated all people fairly, whether guard or prisoner. Compassion was her only metric. One afternoon, Warden Hawthorne walked into the infirmary without fanfare. He stopped by a cot. An inmate with a bad infection was being treated. Hawthorne nodded quietly at Marina, who was adjusting the bandage. She looked up, startled. Warden's face unreadable. He placed his hand on his heart, brought his forefinger up in a salute, a crisp military salute, full of respect. In a hush, every voice in the infirmary paused. The guards stiffened, the inmates stared, the nurses halted. Marina's heart pounded. She stood. She returned the salute, the only gesture that felt right. The room was silent. Then slowly, murmurs of approval spread. The warden then said, "You have earned this." Simple, heavy, in that gesture Hawthorne acknowledged everything. The courage, the insistence on justice even when inconvenient, the compassion even when cost was high. He saluted not as a show, but as recognition. Marina's eyes blurred. The warden's salute was more than a gesture. It said, "You belong here. You matter. You have changed how we define what justice means under these walls." Life didn't become perfect, but the tone had changed. Staff no longer whispered so much about her overstepping. Some asked for her opinions. The guards who once glared nodded in the corridors. Inmates, when she passed, said thank you. A few visits from external agencies found the prison in much better shape. The infirmary was praised. The warden's office credited Marina for pushing reforms. Marina reflected on what it had taken. Courage to speak truth, even when spoken alone. Compassion, even when faced with resistance. Integrity to treat all persons humanely. She sometimes thought back to the moment she first walked through the gates, full of fear. Now she saw the seeds she had sown. It was painful, it was slow, it was hard, but it was worth it. In time, Marina's story spread beyond Blackstone. Other correctional facilities adopted similar policies. Other nurses, inspired by her example, insisted on higher standards. And in Blackstone, the guard Grayson, once hostile, offered a nod in the hallway. Felicia, the nurse manager, began consulting her on schedule. The morale among inmates improved when they saw someone who cared enough to ensure their injuries were not paper statistics, but human suffering to be tended. Years later, when Marina considered leaving, she was offered a promotion, Director of Correctional Health for the regional system. She paused. She remembered the early mornings in the smoky halls, the fear in MS Benton's voice, the suspicious eyes of Darren, the anger of the guards, Hawthorne's stern countenance. She thought, perhaps I should stay, build more from here. She took the promotion. They made her work across several prisons. She traveled, consulting, training. Wherever she went, she carried the lesson. Dignity must be defended. Care is not weakness. Healing is a form of justice. One summer day, she visited Blackstone again, now in the role of director. The infirmary shone compared to her early days. Nurses working carefully, new staff, well, kept records. In the hallway she saw Warden Hawthorne, older, gray at the temples, still stern, still careful. He saw her, offered a salute. She returned it. No crowd. Just two people in full recognition of struggle, of wrongs confronted, of humanity preserved despite walls. Compassion, integrity, courage. They shine brightest in places built for punishment. Sometimes what institutions need is someone willing to care, even when the cost is high. When you stand for what is right, even if alone, eventually respect may follow, even from those who seemed hardest. And true leadership includes honoring those who serve with heart, for healing echoes louder than authority.